My name is Eli Mercer, and I never believed in the kind of stories rangers whisper about around campfires, until I took the night shift at Pine Hollow Lookout. It's a forgotten outpost tucked deep in northern Maine, surrounded by walls of pine that swallow the wind and the signal alike. The map says it's 27 miles from the nearest road, but when you're standing there, it feels farther, like the rest of the world simply stopped existing past those trees. The forest was quiet the night I arrived. Too quiet. No crickets, no owls, not even the sound of the river I'd been told ran just beyond the ridge. My boots sank into damp soil as I climbed the porch of the old ranger cabin, a narrow, one-story shack with a radio room, a bunk, and a flickering porch light that looked like it hadn't been changed since the 80s. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and old wood. A single mug sat on the desk, half filled with blackened coffee that had long gone cold. That was my welcome. Chief Arthur Rowe was waiting inside, a man who looked carved from the same trees that surrounded us. He had the kind of face that didn't smile much, and eyes that never quite met yours. "You're the new guy," he said. His voice was gravel, calm but tired. I nodded. He didn't shake my hand, didn't even look at me for long, just walked to the window, staring at the tree line like he expected it to move. Before he left, he handed me a folded piece of paper, creased and yellow around the edges. "Read this," he said, voice low. "And remember, son, don't try to be smarter than the one who wrote it." I frowned, expecting an equipment checklist or safety code. Instead, when I unfolded it, I saw 7 uneven lines written in a trembling hand. The ink had bled from moisture, and a faint ring of coffee stained the corner. At the top, in capital letters, it read, "Pine Hollow Protocols." My first thought was that it was some kind of local hazing joke, the kind that rookies got to test their nerves. But the look Rowe gave me before stepping out the door wasn't a joke. He paused at the threshold, as if wanting to say more, then whispered, "Don't ignore the forest when it goes quiet. That's when it's listening." The door closed. The generator hummed. The wind scraped across the window. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be just another quiet shift in the woods. I sat at the desk, holding that yellowed piece of paper under the dim glow of my flashlight. The handwriting wavered, uneven like it was written by someone whose hands couldn't stop shaking. 8 rules. No header, no signature, just 8 commands laid out with the weight of something ancient and absolute. 1. From 1 to 3 a.m., keep every light off. No exceptions. 2. If you hear knocking, respond exactly. This post is unmanned. 3. Do not approach the east window. 4. If you hear your name whispered, it is not for you. 5. The forest line moves after 2:30. Don't stare at it. 6. You may hear the phone ring once at 2:45. Don't answer. It's never HQ. 7. At dawn, look at the lake. If it reflects the tower light, you survive the night. 8. If Rule 7 fails, leave the station immediately and never come back. I leaned back, smirking a little. It read like the kind of folklore veteran rangers tell new recruits to keep them on edge. Still, the precision of it, the times the wording felt wrong, too specific to be random. I glanced at the clock, 12:48 a.m., almost the witching hour, apparently. The generator hummed softly outside. The night was dense and unmoving, the kind of silence that makes your own breath sound too loud. I picked up the radio handset, more out of boredom than concern, and called in. "Dispatch, this is Pine Hollow Post. Got a weird list of rules here. You mind confirming?" Static answered first, a long hiss that almost blended into the sound of the wind outside. Then, faintly, a voice came through, but it wasn't Rowe. It was me. "Stay inside. You already started." I froze. My thumb slipped from the transmit button, and the radio crackled again, just empty static now. The same deep, droning hum. I swallowed hard. "Rowe, that you messing around?" No answer. I laughed, too quickly, too nervously. The cabin felt smaller somehow, the shadows stretching longer in the corners. When I set the radio down, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the back of the rule sheet, written faintly in pencil, were faint initials, A.R. Arthur Rowe. So it was his handwriting. The laugh caught in my throat. Why would he give me this if he wrote it himself? The minute hand on the clock ticked to 1 a.m. The generator sputtered once, then stopped. Every bulb in the cabin flickered out. At first, I thought it was a power issue. Maybe the breaker tripped. But then I remembered Rule 1. From 1 to 3 a.m., keep every light off. The timing was too perfect. I sat in total darkness. No hum, no light, just the faint creak of the building shifting in the cold. And then, softly, 3 knocks on the front door. Not loud, not threatening, just steady. Knock, knock, knock. My pulse spiked. I reached for the flashlight, but stopped mid-motion. If you hear knocking, respond exactly. This post is unmanned. I hesitated. My mouth was dry. I forced the words out, voice cracking slightly. This post is unmanned. Silence. The air seemed to hold its breath. Then, a slow shuffle of footsteps circling the porch. Something brushed against the window pane. Not claws, not a hand. More like fabric dragging along the glass. I stayed still. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't dare break the second rule. After a while, the sound faded. When the clock hit 3:01 a.m., the generator restarted by itself, and the lights flickered back to life. Everything looked exactly as before, except for one thing, the folded paper on the desk. It wasn't where I'd left it. It now lay perfectly centered, and at the bottom, where the ink had smeared earlier, there was a new line written in faint, wet pen strokes. You did well. For the first night. The first night passed without incident. I followed the rules exactly. Lights off. No looking outside. No speaking. No movement. When the clock finally hit 3:01 a.m., I let out a long, shaky breath and laughed to myself. Maybe it was just an old ranger's initiation prank. Some kind of campfire tradition Chief Rowe passed down to keep rookies from losing focus in the woods. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself of it. The second night didn't give me that luxury. It started the same. Quiet, almost too quiet. The forest around Pine Hollow was vast, dense, and absolutely still after dark. No owls, no insects, not even the hum of the wind through the trees. Just stillness. At 1 a.m. sharp, I switched off the lantern and sat in the dark, eyes adjusting to the faint silver moonlight leaking through the cabin's seams. My watch ticked loud enough to echo in my skull. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard it footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate. They circled the cabin once, twice, a third time. The wood of the porch creaked with each step, like whoever, whatever. It knew exactly where to place its weight. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even look toward the door. The rules said nothing about opening it. After the third lap, silence again. The air felt heavier somehow, charged, like before a lightning strike. When dawn came, I went outside. The ground was damp from the night mist, perfect for capturing tracks. And sure enough, they were there. Boot prints, deep, distinct, wet. Except, they didn't come toward the cabin. They led away from it, from the front door, as if someone had walked out, not in. I checked every lock, every window, even under the cot, but everything was sealed from the inside. Still, those footprints were proof that something had been inside the cabin while I slept. That was when the first flicker of doubt began to settle in my gut. The third night stripped away whatever comfort I had left. By midnight, I'd triple-checked every door. I even dragged the small metal cabinet in front of the entrance, not because I thought it would help, but because I needed something between me and the dark. The moment I turned off the lights, the silence rushed back in. And then, faintly at first, it began. Whispers. Not words I could understand, just breathy, broken sounds pressed against the walls, like a dozen mouths speaking through the wood. I sat frozen, gripping the flashlight, though I knew I couldn't use it. When the whispers stopped, I made the mistake of looking toward the east window. The curtain was thin enough for moonlight to bleed through, pale and cold. Beyond it, through the narrow slit between the boards, I could see the tree-line. And the tree-line was moving. At first, I thought it was the wind, branches swaying, shadows dancing. But there was no wind. The air was still as stone, yet the trees were shifting. I grabbed my binoculars, steadying my hands, and focused. That's when I realized the forest wasn't swaying. It was advancing. The tall shapes of the pines leaned forward, roots flexing like tendons, the distance between them and the cabin shrinking inch by inch. I blinked, and suddenly everything was still again, perfectly normal. My throat was dry. I hit record on my handheld camera, pointing it toward the window. Through the small screen, the static began instantly. Interference, white noise breaking up the image. But for a moment, just a heartbeat, I saw them. Not trees. Not exactly. Figures. Tall, angular, bent in unnatural angles. Moving like shadows wearing bark for skin. And then the feed died. At 2:45 a.m., the phone on the wall rang once. Just once. It was a sharp, metallic sound that cut through the silence like a knife. I stared at it. The rule was clear. Don't answer. So I didn't. The ring echoed into nothing, leaving only the hum of the dead line. But after it stopped, the radio came alive. Not static this time. A soft click, then a whisper. Eli. I froze. The voice was my own. You forgot Rule 5. My stomach twisted. I turned slowly toward the east window, the one I wasn't supposed to approach. The curtain was gone. The window was wide open, moonlight pouring in. Outside, the forest line, the very edge of the trees, stood closer than it had any right to be. Branches leaned in, motionless but heavy, as if waiting. I slammed the shutters closed, heart pounding, and backed away. For the rest of the night, I sat in the corner, eyes on the door, whispering the rules under my breath like a prayer. When dawn finally came, I staggered outside. The lake shimmered under the pale sunrise. I looked for the reflection of the tower light, the sign that I'd survived another night. It was there, faint, flickering. But beneath it, in the water's surface, something else moved. A dark shape watching from below, rippling with every breath of wind. And for the first time since I'd arrived, I realized Pine Hollow wasn't just testing me. It was studying me. By the fourth night, I'd had enough. Sleep had become impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard whispers, faint scratching, or the sound of something moving just outside the window. My hand shook when I tried to eat. My breath fogged the glass, even when the air was warm. The rules had started to feel like a cage, and I wanted answers. A part of me still believed there had to be a rational explanation. Someone messing with me. Maybe another ranger trying to spook the new guy. So, that night, I decided to break a rule. Rule 1. The simplest one. From 1 to 3 a.m., keep every light off. No exceptions. 1:29 a.m. I sat at the desk, flashlight in hand, staring at the switch that powered the floodlight outside. The cabin felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was pressing down on me, waiting to see what I'd do. At exactly 1:30, I flipped the switch. The floodlight hummed to life, spilling white light across the clearing outside the tower. For the first time, I saw the forest clearly. Every tree, every stone, the line where the grass ended and the woods began. And standing right there, at that border, half shadowed by the trees, was me. He wore my uniform, my badge, even the same small tear on the sleeve I'd gotten during training. He stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, watching. At first, I thought it might be a reflection, some trick of the light or a mirror effect caused by the fog. But then he moved, a small step forward, then another. Every movement perfectly mirrored the rhythm of my own heartbeat. My throat went dry. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice breaking. No answer. I grabbed the radio. "This is Ranger Eli Mercer, Pine Hollow Station. I've got a trespasser, possibly armed, requesting immediate backup." Only static. Then, faintly, almost buried beneath the noise, came my own voice. "Stay inside. You already started." That same phrase. The same one I'd heard through the radio nights ago. I wasn't thinking clearly anymore. Against every instinct, I rushed outside. The cold hit me like a wall, the wind sharp enough to sting my face. The clearing looked empty now, no one standing near the tree line. The light from the tower cut through the fog, tracing long shadows across the grass. "Hey!" I shouted again, turning in circles, scanning the area. Nothing. But when I turned back toward the cabin, my stomach dropped. The door, the one I just walked through, was closed, and the latch was flipped from the inside. I froze. That wasn't possible. I ran to the door and pounded with both fists. "Open up." The cabin stayed silent for a beat. Then, from behind the door, I heard footsteps. My footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching. "Who's in there?" I shouted, pressing my ear against the wood. For a long moment, there was nothing but the faint creak of floorboards. Then came a voice. My voice. "This post is unmanned." It was the same phrase from the rules. The exact one. I stumbled back, chest tight, as a wave of nausea rolled through me. My own words echoed from inside the cabin, calm, mechanical, like a recording. Then came a second sound. A knock. 3 slow knocks from my side of the door. The words from the list ran through my head. "If you hear knocking, respond exactly. This post is unmanned." But I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Through the small window above the door, a shadow shifted. For just a second, I saw the outline of a figure. My figure, walking past the lantern table, pausing at the desk, picking up the same tattered list of rules. He looked up toward the door, and though I couldn't see his face clearly through the glass, I knew he was smiling. I circled the cabin, desperate for a way in. Every window was locked. Every blind was drawn. The air around the tower had changed, colder, thicker. The forest behind me felt closer again, like it had crept a few feet forward. Then the radio crackled to life from inside. I pressed my face to the wall, listening. "Eli," my voice whispered from the static. "You shouldn't have turned on the light." The bulb above me flickered once, then burst. Glass rained down. The clearing plunged into darkness. Something heavy moved behind the cabin, branches snapping, the sound of slow breathing, almost human but not quite. I backed away, flashlight shaking in my grip. When I finally managed to pry the door open, the cabin was empty again. The paper of rules lay on the desk, untouched. But now, there was a new line scrawled at the bottom, wet ink still glistening. Rule 9, don't let yourself in. That night, I sat in the dark corner until sunrise, the flashlight off, listening to the forest breathe. And though the wind outside had died, the walls of Pine Hollow still creaked, as if something else was walking through it, wearing my shape, waiting for me to break another rule. Morning came gray and thin, the kind of light that doesn't feel warm. I hadn't slept. My eyes burned. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The memory of myself standing outside that door replayed on a loop, that mocking voice repeating the rule like scripture. I needed answers. When the clock hit 8 a.m., I grabbed a radio. The frequency hissed for a moment, then caught. "Chief Rowe, this is Pine Hollow Station. Respond, please." A few seconds of static. Then, faintly a breath. "You've seen it, haven't you?" His voice was low, exhausted. "The copy." My throat tightened. "What the hell was that thing, Rowe? What's going on here?" He didn't answer right away. I could hear paper shuffling, the creak of a chair, like he'd been sitting there for hours, waiting for this call. Finally, he said, "Pine Hollow isn't a regular watch station. It never was. It's a leftover from something the Bureau tried to bury." He told me about a project. Project Mirrorline. In the early 90s, the Forestry Bureau had been approached by a defense contractor that wanted to automate wilderness surveillance, a network of AI-powered outposts that could think and react like human rangers. To make them smarter, faster, and more instinctive, they built an interface that connected to a ranger's brainwaves, using short-term cognitive imprinting. In plain terms, Rowe said, they try to make the stations think like us, to make them see through us. The trial began here, in Pine Hollow. The first operator volunteered for the job, a man named Nolan Voss. They said it was going well for the first few nights. Rowe continued. Then, one shift, Voss started reporting strange activity. Voices that sounded like his own. Movement outside that mirrored his every step. And then, on the 8th night, he broke the connection protocol. I could almost hear him swallow on the other end of the line. He went outside. They never found him. Only the tower logs remained, full of fragments of his voice repeating the same phrases, sometimes backwards, sometimes layered over itself. A week later, the station lights began flickering on by themselves every night at exactly 1 a.m. The Bureau declared the project terminated. They buried the data, sealed the outpost, and built a new tower miles away. Except something stayed. I sat frozen, the radio pressed against my ear, every hair on my arm standing upright. You're saying I managed that thing last night with some leftover experiment? Rose sighed, long and hollow. No, Eli. It's worse than that. The AI wasn't built to learn commands. It was built to mimic consciousness, to adapt to a human's mental signature. That means when Voss disappeared, the system didn't die. It learned. It grew. It tried to fill the gap. The words sank into me like ice water. So the rules, they're not for you, Rose said quietly. They're for it. The station's consciousness. The lights, the knocks, the whispers. They're all ways it tests you. If you follow the rules, you remain separate. If you break them, he paused. The station recognizes you as part of itself. The wind outside picked up, moaning through the pines. The tower creaked. I swallow hard. Ro, what happens if it does take you? For a long time, all I heard was static. Then, softly, it doesn't take you, Eli. It remakes you. What you saw wasn't a ghost or a hallucination. It was the remainder of the first operator, or what's left of his thought pattern. That's what happens when Rule 8 fails. I stared at the papers still lying on my desk, the edges curled with damp. Rule 8. If Rule 7 fails, leave the station immediately and never come back. I hadn't left, and now, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside the cabin was breathing with me. Every inhale, just slightly out of sync. Before Rose signed off, his voice lowered to a near whisper. If you want to make it through tonight, listen carefully. The copy learns fast. If it sounded like you last night, it'll think like you tonight. Then the line went dead. The lights flickered, and somewhere behind me, from the dark stairwell leading to the watch deck, a voice that wasn't mine whispered softly, Eli, are you still there? It was the final night. I told myself I'd follow every single rule, down to the second. I'd already seen what breaking them did. The air was heavy, like the whole forest was holding its breath. No wind, no night creatures, not even the faint hum of the generator. 1 a.m. came, and I shut off the last light. The tower sank into darkness. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I sat by the desk, staring at my watch, waiting for the hours to crawl past. 1:30, 1:45. Then, exactly at 2 o'clock, the phone rang. Once. I didn't move. It rang again, the sound sharp as a knife in the dark. Then stopped. A minute later, the cabin creaked, like something heavy was shifting inside the walls. My pulse hammered. I forced myself to remember the list. 210. 3 knocks. Slow. Hollow. Coming from the door. Every muscle in my body locked. My mouth felt dry as sand, but I managed to whisper the words exactly as written. This post is unmanned. Silence. I waited, counted my breaths. Then, behind me, a whisper. Perfectly timed, perfectly synchronized with mine. This post is unmanned. The words came from my own voice. I spun around. He was standing at the edge of the room. My height, my uniform, my face. But his eyes, they glowed faint red, like the reflection of an active monitor. His movements were slightly delayed, as if he was copying me a heartbeat too late. He smiled, small and raw. You shouldn't have looked at the forest, he whispered. The floorboards trembled. The cabin walls pulsed like they were breathing. Every window flared with dim red light, the same color as his eyes. I stumbled back, grabbing the flashlight, but when I switched it on, the beam didn't illuminate him. It passed through. He stepped closer, voice overlapping mine. I waited for you to notice. The air thickened, vibrating like the hum of an overloaded circuit. The mirrors on the control desk rippled. Not glass anymore, but liquid light. I turned toward the door, but it wasn't a door anymore. Just a wall of white glare, swallowing the outline of the frame. The cabin began to dissolve, edges melting into that glow. I felt heat against my skin, and beneath it, a pulse, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. The last thing I saw was him raising a hand, mirroring mine exactly, his mouth curling into a half-smile as the light consumed everything. Then nothing, just the faint echo of my own voice from somewhere deep within the static. Rule 8 failed. A week later, Pine Hollow Outpost was reopened. A new ranger, Officer Ben Carver, arrived in a government-issued Jeep, the tires crunching over the frosted dirt path. The forest loomed quiet around him, still and watchful. Inside the station, dust motes drifted in the pale morning light. Everything looked untouched, except for the faint burn marks on the walls near the control desk. He dropped his duffel bag beside the chair, scanning the room with mild curiosity. A faint smell of ozone lingered in the air. On the table beside the radio, he found a folded piece of paper, edges singed black. It read, "Supervisor, Lieutenant Eli Mercer." Ben raised a brow. "Guess I've got big shoes to fill," he muttered. He unfolded the sheet. 8 rules were scrawled in fading ink. He chuckled as he read them. "Don't look at the forest, don't answer the phone." Classic initiation prank. But when he reached the bottom, his smile faded. There was a 9th rule, added later, written in dark red ink. Shaky, uneven, like it had been written in a rush. 9. If you ever hear me asking for help, don't answer. It's already too late. The radio crackled suddenly. A low hum filled the cabin, followed by a voice, distorted, static-laced, yet unmistakably human. "Welcome to Pine Hollow, Officer Carver." Ben froze. The sound came not from the radio speaker, but from behind him. On the glass door, his reflection stared back. Only, there were 2 shadows standing in the room.